I never anticipated that when I sought healing through flying. I have now several business partnerships that have come as a result of me inviting someone to come fly with me, and with no thought of recompense for that at all. But those relationships led to business and investing opportunities.
If you're not conscious about your investment strategy, you won't end up where you want to be, not financially or as a human. On this show, we interview highly successful investors and share how they overcame limitations to become unstoppable forces of success. If you're ready to learn what it is to be a conscious investor so you can end up where you want, keep listening.
Conscious investor, welcome back. Now, I have trashy North Idaho internet, so if you're watching on YouTube, you might get some frozen moments. And I'm going to just show you. If you're over on the YouTube channel, you're going to see I'm actually using my phone, and I'm logged in via my phone because I don't want the audio to be disrupted for this conversation. And we had a terrible storm last night. You know how it goes in North Idaho. You've heard me talk about it. So I just wanted to preface this conversation by letting you know that. But oh my goodness, conscious investor, I know that your heart is huge. And that's why you love investing with Three Keys Investments, because your money isn't just making money somewhere, but your money is like doing something that is like your dollars are doing more than just making you dollars. Your dollars are doing great things in the world. And that is part of your heartbeat as well. And that's why I wanted to bring Alan onto the show today with Angel Wings West. He has such an amazing story. Let me backtrack and let you know, how did I even meet Alan? Because there's usually a story with most of the guests. I very rarely have a guest on here that I have not been connected to in some way, somehow, by either someone that I know or by meeting them in person or online. So there's usually a deeper connection. In this particular instance, you probably remember my friend, Dustin Heiner. Well, Dustin, he's been on the show twice, so go check out those podcast episodes. He just had the big RubeCon event. You heard me talking about that for a while. Guess what? Alan presented at RubeCon. I didn't even know who Alan was. And he presented about Angel Wings West. And I was floored because if you've been listening for a while, you knew I grew up in the suburbs of California. I started my family in Denver, Colorado, and now I live in rural, far north Idaho on the Canadian border. As we have this discussion, you'll see why this really hit for me. And I think that it's going to resonate with you and really provide an opportunity for you to participate in something really great. So with all that, Alan, I am so excited about diving into this conversation. You're like, I don't know what's in store for me, but it's going to be great.
Absolutely. I trust you, Julie. We'll be in good shape.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. It is trust well placed. I can assure you of that. And so can you just tell us a little bit about, and I'm calling it Angel Wings. I should be embarrassed, but I'm mature enough to say, whoops, Angel Flight West.
Yeah, no need to be embarrassed. We accept Angel Wings West also. So yeah, Angel Flight West is a nonprofit organization that actually started 40 years ago this year. So we're celebrating our 40th birthday. And it started in California, in Santa Monica, and it was a group of pilots at the Santa Monica airport that wanted to do something better in the world. And they recognized that they had a skill set that maybe a lot of people want to have. I run into a lot of people with a bucket list to become a pilot. And they started doing charitable flights for people with non-emergency medical needs that were traveling for specialized care. So really good example of that is maybe perhaps a child who needs specialized pediatric cancer treatment or transplant patients that need to travel. And that's how it started. And we fast forward now, this year, we'll complete our 100,000th charitable flight. We have 2,000 volunteer pilots across the 13 Western states. And the organization is also really lean. So because our pilots donate their time, they use their aircraft, and they pay for the entire cost of the flight. Our operating budget last year for the charity was around $2 million, and our pilots donated over $8 million in like-kind donations for these flights. And I can go into more detail on what our different missions are. There's several different missions. You tell me where you'd like to go from here, Julie.
Well, let's just start there. I think conscious investor, I don't know about you, but I'm very aware of what nonprofits I align myself with and contribute to and such, because you never know how they're actually being managed. And when you were presenting at RubeCon, and your presentation included so many details with videos that we cannot show here, but Conscious Investor will put links in the show notes. You can go and check things out. So many great things on the website, on YouTube. Like, you can go find lots of great information. But really what struck me was a lot of times we'll hear, oh, it's a streamlined budget on the admin side of things. But when you were discussing that the pilots, now I happen to have friends that are pilots that have their own planes, and I'm aware of fuel costs and such. And so when you were describing these pilots are using their aircraft, their time, and they're providing the fuel, I saw all the dollar signs. And so to hear the like kind donation of, that's such a huge, ginormous gift to give. Yeah. I think I'm out of words for this, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know of any other charitable organization that could boast in addition to what funds they raised from other philanthropic efforts and outreach efforts, that their volunteers donated 4 to 5 times more than what anyone else did.
How do you find them? And how do pilots who want to get involved, so let's just say I know some local pilots with planes, is that something that they could be involved with? And then let's stop there. I have a million questions.
Good. Hopefully I have 1,000,001 answers. They'll stay at least with you. Yeah, so we do need pilots, especially in rural areas like Northern Idaho, Montana, Alaska. Those are areas that, as you know, if someone needs specialized care of any kind, you usually don't have that care available very close to you. You may have to travel to Boise or Salt Lake City or Denver. And so you're talking about a trip of 3 or 4 or 5 hours, depending on where you are. And so really the qualifications for a pilot is they need to have 250 hours as a pilot in command. And we prefer having an instrument rating. I happen to be commercially rated and instrument rated, but you don't have to have all of those ratings. And it's very easy. You go to our website, angelflightwest.org, and there's a link to volunteer. You enter your information as a pilot. One of our team will reach out and get in contact with you. They'll be very excited. And then hopefully they'll connect you with somebody else who's local. That is a big challenge. One that I found is pilots they flock together depending on what airport they're at. And so getting into a local airport and getting to know pilots there. So if your listeners are in any of the 13 Western states and they have a pilot friend at a small airport, connect with me on LinkedIn or message me, and I'd be happy to connect with them pretty much anywhere. I focus on Arizona, but we have other volunteers doing outreach all over the Western U.S.
That is amazing. And I already have my wheels spinning of, okay, you and I will connect more after in the green room. And Conscious Investor, here's one of the realities. A couple of years ago, this happens on a regular basis in our small town, but there is a family, their daughter actually caught on fire just by accident. The little trim of her skirt caught on fire and she basically combusted. And she spent months over in Seattle, which is a 6-hour drive one way. And so I understand with like Angel Flight West, that's obviously a significant hardship on a family that had multiple kids. It would just have been amazing to see if we had a pilot, an Angel Flight West pilot, or some type of thing to help transport to that care that she had to go through for so many months. What is it that really drew you in to being a pilot and contributing in this way?
I think this part of the story will resonate with you, Julie, because I've heard a little bit of some of your recent experience. So for me, it sounds funny to say, but what drew me in was actually first started with grief. In 2018, we found out that my mother-in-law had cancer and we lost her a week later. And then in 2019, we lost my father-in-law to cancer. They lived a mile away from us. My kids saw them every day. They were at our house every day. My wife walked with her mom every morning. They were best friends. And those losses were unimaginably painful for her. And I thought, for me, I realized about 13 months after her dad passed away that I didn't really understand what she was going through when I lost my dad to a massive stroke at the age of 66. And my dad and I, we'd been business partners for all of my adult life. We shared an office for 13 years. And those three losses together really sunk me. I went from being a very capable entrepreneur. I had created a business from scratch that was doing over $16 million a year, was investing in real estate. And after that, I go into the office. I could only stand to be there for a few hours. And I'd get in my truck and drive to a state park and spend most of the rest of the day sleeping in the back seat of my truck. I was so depressed and grieving. And I knew right away I wasn't going to be able to maintain the business. So I sold my interest in the business and spent really the next couple of years rebuilding my life, trying to discover and recover. And I'm a big believer in prayer. And I could show you, I have a note card that at the worst of the depression that I was experiencing, I wrote down 3 things that I wanted to feel happiness again. I wanted to feel prosperous again, and I wanted to feel like my life had a purpose. And at the time that I wrote those down, I didn't feel like any of those things were possible. It just seemed unimaginable that I could feel those things again because it was so dark. And at the time, I thought it was a crazy answer to prayer, where I felt like I should go take a flying lesson. And I really questioned that. I thought, this is crazy. Why would I go spend the money? I'm not earning anything right now on flying lessons. It's not cheap. And I went and talked to my wife about it. And that wasn't a small ask for her either, because her uncle had been killed in a small plane crash. So she had a fear of small planes. And I just said, hey, I would like for you to pray about this. And if it feels good, then we'll do it. If it doesn't feel good, then we need to find something else, because I can't keep living the way that I'm living. And she did. She came back and she said, I feel like God has told me that he'll hold you in his hands. And I'll never forget my first flying lesson. Anybody that's done this will probably say the same thing. I don't know. Actually, maybe some people were terrorized by a flying lesson. I don't know. But I will never forget lifting off the runway the first time. My whole spirit lifted in the wings of that airplane. And I ended up flying about 300 hours that first year that I was learning how to fly.
That's a lot.
It is a ton. It was like 5 days a week. I wasn't doing anything else. I was a total airplane junkie. I bought 2 airplanes that first year. Actually, within the first year, I bought 3 and kept 1. I started an airplane rental business. Ultimately, what I was looking for was a way that I could help others experience the same thing that I had. I wanted to help provide hope. I wanted to help provide healing. I wanted to help provide happiness. And that's what aviation did for me. So I started Googling aviation charities. I discovered Angel Flight West. I signed up as a pilot, flew my first mission, which happened to be a young man, that 18-year-old boy who was traveling 5.5 to 6 hours 3 times a week for cancer treatment. My flight with him was 1 hour and 15 minutes. So you can imagine how life-changing that was for his family. And I realized pretty quickly, I reached out to Angel Flight West and I said, hey, how are you doing outreach? Who is connecting with hospitals? How are we connecting with pilots? And their answer was, we've been trying to find somebody that would do that for us. And I raised my hand. That was about a year ago. And I just volunteer for them. They don't pay me anything, but we thought aviation was addicting. Outreach for this charity for me has been worse. I donated about 1,000 hours of my time the first year donating with them. When I walked in the door for my first flight, my wife took one look at me and she said, you found your thing today, didn't you? She could just tell that the light had come back into my eyes. And I said, yeah, I did. And connecting that thing with a charitable mission has been one of the greatest blessings of my life. So happy to report that on that note card, I can check off that I feel happy, I feel prosperous, I feel like my life has a purpose. And I would just want to help other people that have been in the same position to receive those same gifts.
Oh my gosh. It's so amazing because, Conscious Master, you know, my faith is the anchor of my life. And in life, there are, whatever your belief is, there is a point to where I always say you have to put your toes in the water and it's uncomfortable and God acts, but it takes faith and trust and just your wife's willingness to not dismiss your request to, I mean, that's a big deal. I'm a wife like that, where my husband made a request. He's like, well, I feel like we need to do this. And he's given me a couple of requests like that. And I've surprised myself in not just saying no way. So for your wife to simply not, and I don't know her, I imagine she is an amazing woman of character and everything, but it's also difficult for me and my human, it'd be easier to just say, no way, forget that. Right. So I see that God acts in those moments so often where we can just say, okay, I'm just going to put this in God's hands. I'm going to pray. I'll be open to God's guidance on this versus my humanness in it. And it's so powerful. And to see where your willingness to see, this is where I'm at. I've been grieving and I am depressed and this isn't sustainable or where I want to be. And oftentimes I've experienced a lot of grief, and I share an unfortunate, unexpected loss of my dad at 69, and it rocks your world in a really powerful way. And life is never the same, especially if they're your true north. It sounds like your dad was just like mine. And so you see the answer of hope through the expression of faith. And it's just absolutely inspirational to see that you took all of the steps.
I think still taking them, you step up, you step out, but then there's something else that for me invites to a better relationship. And whether that's with God or with the universe, everybody has their own beliefs there. But it was interesting, and I'm sure you experienced this too. I can remember when my dad died, and on the heels of losing both in-laws, I can remember driving back and forth in front of our church, swearing at the top of my lungs. I was so mad that I had been a man of faith. I was really angry at what God had invited into my life. And I think true to form, there are bigger and better things for us. I had attained what most people would consider success. And in retrospect now, most of it was pretty false. It wasn't what I'm doing now. I'm not earning anywhere near what I was then.
No way.
Spending too much time in the airplane. But what I'm getting out of life is so much greater than that. And there's still things that we're figuring out. We'll continue. But I read books for years that talk about give away as much as you can. And I never anticipated that when I sought healing through flying, when I started giving, what would come. I have now several business partnerships that have come as a result of me inviting someone to come fly with me. Let's go share lunch together. I'll fly you to Sedona. And with no thought of recompense for that at all, but those relationships that resulted led to business and investing opportunities. And that continues. The pilot community is very tight and very community oriented. And so I'm starting an investment fund right now. And I imagine that most of the investors there will be fellow pilots, not exclusive to pilots, but it is a giving, trusting, caring community. And I'm just really proud to be a part of it.
It's amazing. I just love this narrative so much. And I love that you said, but it still requires faith. And I think that's the exciting part, is that I've had a conversation a lot recently where it's clear, like, life always requires that step of faith, and we can choose fear, we can choose faith, we have a choice, and it becomes quite the adventure. I feel like my life is such an adventure because that openness and that willingness to just to say, okay, I'm going to follow where you go. I'm sure of where you want me to go, but I'm really not sure of all the details of it. I see the direction, but I don't know what's going to come along the way. And I didn't know I'd meet you. And every person that we meet has a little impact in our life that just like helps us understand and have a greater awareness, which is really exciting. So I love that you pointed out it's not a stopping spot. It is a continuation through all of life, which is important. And I wonder, since you have 8 children, the impact that this is going to have in their lives and your response to grief, in your ability to recover. And I say that loosely. I use that word very loosely, but to do something intentional, meaningful, purposeful, to use. I bought a sign when my father passed away that says, like, we'll make lemonade out of the lemons. All right, bad things happen. Like, life gets hard, but I have a choice. And it'll be really neat to see as all your kids enter adulthood, what that brings about.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that too, because that also was a journey of experience and learning. my wife and I's world was rocked so deeply by the losses that we experienced that I don't think that in the beginning, and probably for the first couple of years, that we were as aware, maybe as we should have been, of what our kids were experiencing. And part of that was we were just so wounded ourselves that there needed to be some healing and recovery. So right now, 3 of our 4 oldest kids, we are paying for counseling and life coaching for them. And so that's from our oldest, who will be 23 this year, down to our down to so maybe it's the oldest 5, down to our 14-year-old. And the blessing that has been, we have seen exponential changes in them, and their ability to talk about grief, to talk about hurt, has allowed our relationship with them to deepen and expand in ways that wouldn't have been imaginable. And this is all within the last few months, Julie. So this is still really fresh for us. In fact, last night we were visiting with my 17-year-old after he finished a session doing an EMDR therapy with his counselor. And I am just so grateful for people that have those skills. And everyone that I know now, I'm in a great networking group now, and everyone that I know is working with a coach of some kind. And I know that for me, 2 or 3 years ago, I thought that I knew it all. I was succeeding. I didn't need someone else to show me how to do it any better. And how that viewpoint has changed now to where, whether it's an emotional issue you're dealing with, or maybe there's an addiction that you're struggling with, maybe it's grief, maybe it's just that you feel like you're not living at your fullest capacity, I could not recommend more fully working with someone that you can trust, that can help guide you through those difficult challenges. So when you say, I'll follow you, that sounds pretty easy when life is good. But when that path goes through the valley of the shadow of death and grief and pain and suffering, that's a whole different commitment that is difficult. And I'm sure it doesn't end. I can remember being at the gym a few months ago and a song came on that I hadn't heard before, and it completely wrecked me. In fact, the name of the song is Wrecked. So it was aptly titled. And I came home.
Is that an Imagine Dragons song?
It is.
Yeah, that song, when I heard it the first time, it actually just put me into tears. Also, the grief is clear in the entire song.
It broke me open. And that was also a beautiful experience. I came home and I was just I was in the fetal position on my bed, sobbing. And up until that point, I had associated crying and grieving even with being weak. And I was afraid that if I showed any kind of weakness, even with my wife, we'd been married for 24 years, 23 years at the time, that if I allowed her to see any weakness or any suffering of any kind, that wouldn't be lovable. And that was really one of the first times where I just invited her into that space. That breaking open allowed for another seed of love to be planted in our relationship. There have been more breaking open experiences, both on her side and on mine, that I think were necessary. And so for as much as I would never want to go through those 3 or 4 years that we experienced, they also probably will be, when we look back, some of the greatest growth experiences of our life. If there's anything I can tell people that are walking through that valley right now, whether it's going through divorce or dealing with addiction or grief of losing a parent or a child or a sibling or any business loss or something, it really is just keep one step in front of the other, find someone that you can trust to help you. And eventually you do come out of that valley. And it's a glorious day when you do, right?
It truly is. And I appreciate, oh gosh, everything you're saying, and just like, amen, amen. Yep. And even to the point of being frustrated with God and being deeply honest with God. And that's a real relationship that we have the opportunity to have, is like, we can talk candidly. And I love that God loves people enough to say, it's okay, talk to me candidly. It's not that I don't know it. Like, it's okay, it's safe. And my comfort's here for you and ever present through all of that. Again, I am like so many questions that I love to explore. I always love to honor time. I'm not always exactly precise with it. But when I think about all the trauma that your family's experienced, and I do, conscious investor, I want you to know, like, coaches are phenomenal. I've worked with a high performance coach. It was transformative. I coach others. I see that transformation. My teenage son works with a coach, and it's not because we think we're terrible parents, but my goodness, growing up in this day and age is challenging. Like, why not have that person on your side? Why not invite that extra support? Sure, we have our church youth pastors, but having a coach that's working with you in this very specific way is extremely powerful. And so I want to encourage you to be open to exploring those options, because whatever I invested in that coaching, it has come back to me 100-fold, if not more. Yeah. And maybe not necessarily in dollars and cents, but in how I'm able to show up for my family in the world and in life. So super powerful.
I've told my wife and my kids several times, like, I can't even imagine where I would be today if I had had the advantage of having a coach as a teenager or young adult, or anywhere for the first 40 years of my life where I didn't take advantage of that.
Oh, I hear you. So you've had this trauma, you've had these experiences, and you've processed through so much of it. I know I'm going into year 8 of my loss, and it's like, there's still different things that come up that arise, and I'm happy to always deal with those elements. But how has all of this impacted how your flights are with patients? How has it impacted those conversations? And what do you see coming from that?
Well, the greatest gift along those lines, and not just on my flights, but just with friends. And I'll never forget the day of my dad's stroke. I was just dealing with the fact that this could be the end of his life. At that point, we weren't sure of that. And I got a text message from a friend, and it was just like, hey, my dad died of a stroke not that long ago. I know exactly how this feels. If you need anything, reach out. And that meant so much to me that he would just, in fact, his wife told me later, they were driving down the freeway, found out about what had happened, and he pulled the truck over immediately to send that text. And for me, I think what's happened is compassion. It's a very different thing to hear about someone going through a challenge or a struggle and not have had the experience of that yourself. And maybe other people can have compassion. For me, that just wasn't a big part of who I was previously. But now, having had the experience of going through, seeing what cancer can do, not just to the individual who has cancer, but to the family around them, to their friendships, to their relationships, to have the experience of losing parents, it makes it so much easier for me to have a conversation like I'm having with you, where I don't need to be afraid of the feelings of grief or depression. Recognizing that you're not broken or worthless because you're not strong all the time has completely changed that. For me, it brings a lot of perspective. I'll go back to my very first flight. His name was Bradley, and they were flying to Phoenix Children's Hospital to find out if Bradley's treatment would continue or if they were done. And I don't remember what my day was like before having them in the plane. But what I can tell you is that if it was a bad day, that went away. When you have somebody in the plane, and I'm sure all of the other pilots feel this way, it provides so much perspective on just how great my life is, no matter what's going on at the time. And I know that there have been studies, and I've read books about how the impact of what giving does for you, from your happiness levels, and that feeling lasts for a long time. So to be able to do that is just such a gift to me. I know it's a gift for them as well, but I think I benefit at least as much as they are from those experiences.
Yeah, it really is amazing. Once you experience different things, if it's a divorce, if it's miscarriages, if it's a loss of someone extremely close to you, all of those things shape and impact our lives and inform us. And so I really believe that's one of the blessings that can really come from the hardships that we experience, is our level of awareness is so heightened that we're able then to engage people and respond to them in a way that would not have been capable of responding to them, because it changes you when you experience them. And I have a tendency to take huge food things over. It's like we had friends that I think you and I were fairly young. I'm just going to put us in the young category.
I appreciate that.
In losing parents, and probably in the first front of that round of our peers to have lost parents. So my ability to respond to peers following my dad's early departure was different. It was impacted and informed, and I was able to provide greater level of care for friends in that position. So
yeah, I think the other thing that just popped into mind too is when I have friends or people in my networking group now whose parents are dealing with Alzheimer's or dementia, or they find out that they have another health condition. My dad had a chronic illness that he was diagnosed with at 49, eventually led to the stroke that he had. And about 5 years before his death, I was looking at our business and making plans. And I asked him a question that probably a lot of forward-thinking entrepreneurs and investors look is, where do you see us in 5 years, Dad? And I'll never forget, he said, I don't think that I'll be here. I don't think that I'll be living. And I stopped right there and I said, well, okay, in that case, then you're retired now. It's your job to go be grandpa. That was a good decision. What also happened with that for me is I was afraid of losing him. And without making a conscious decision, I think in a lot of ways, I withdrew from that relationship a little bit. I didn't lean into it. I didn't want to have vulnerable conversations. It was difficult, and that progressed as his illness progressed. And so one of the most impactful changes for me is really not something that at this point maybe will change my life a lot. But now I can talk to friends and other people who are in a similar experience and let them know I responded to the situation with fear, and that fear trying to protect me from the pain. And so I can appreciate what fear was trying to do for me. But at the same time, if I had responded by leaning into that relationship, there are so many questions that would have been answered, so many conversations that I could have had. And that's really where I feel like I can help others a lot, is saying, hey, here's my experience. From what you're telling me, it sounds like maybe you're afraid of the pain that's coming. And what are some things maybe that you can do to lean into this relationship so that you go through the pain with them rather than just trying to protect yourself in the process, causing pain for both of you. So that has been just a real treasure for me, those conversations with other friends facing difficult circumstances, to say, hey, this is probably going to show up. And my advice would be spend as much time with them as you can, because you just don't know. For me, it was a shock. We didn't know that stroke was coming, but there certainly were opportunities that I missed that I could have taken advantage of.
I can imagine what that's like within your friendship circle and your networking group. And I mean, what's within us comes out of us. Whatever is within always presents itself to the world. That's why I'm like, the freedom of speech, like everything, like whatever. I want to see people's real authentic selves, right? And so I can imagine even those conversations as you're flying patients different places, just with your emotional capacity and bandwidth to be able, in your past experiences, just to be able to have those type of conversations. It's so powerful. This is a conversation that's in my like zone of genius, where I love to like spend forever in this conversation, because conscious investor, I know this is impacting you, and you don't have to have had the same losses. Trauma happens, and too often we dismiss things as, oh, I wasn't smacked on the face, and well, I didn't lose a parent. We think trauma has to be this extremely substantial, significant, obvious factor in our life. And yet we experience micro traumas in our life. And it's not that we had bad people around us or bad parents or anything. It's just how we internalized it. And so I hope that you're taking this part of this conversation to heart as a point of encouragement for you in your healing and your progression in life, because I'm going to reiterate it. You don't have to have this major trauma in order to have trauma that needs healing and to be addressed. And so with that, I'd like to that was my like little bow on top. But I would love to transition. There's some powerful stories that were extremely moving that you shared about patients and what Angel Flight West has been able to accomplish. Can you share with the conscious investor just about some of the impact that those flights and how they've changed lives? As we wrap up our session, really wrap their head around, what does Angel Flight? What is that greater impact? I know it, I feel it, I sense it, but I really want them to get the full effect.
Well, when I talk about Angel Flight West, it's really wrapped in personal experience. I have a daughter right now. I told you about her. that I'm actually working on scheduling angel flights for her. She's going to college and has a chronic illness, and her best treatment option is in Phoenix. And for her to drive from Idaho to Phoenix would be 14 hours each way, plus the wear and tear on their car and on their budget and on her health. And an angel flight from that same area to Phoenix will take, depending on the aircraft that's used, somewhere between 3 and 4 or 5 hours. So it's a dramatic reduction in travel time. Its cost associated with that goes from whatever it would be to zero. So it's a dramatic improvement in the family budget. It allows for healing. It provides hope that there's a way to obtain that. And those conversations that I have with people who we have been able to help, it's the same story every single time. You can't imagine how this has changed my life. I'll share 2 stories, one where that was the case and one where it wasn't the case. And both have provided motivation for me to continue doing what I'm doing. I'd never done any kind of outreach before. And so trying to figure out how to connect with doctors and hospitals and social workers and raise money and all those things was completely foreign and extremely difficult for me. And it was discouraging a little bit. I had a goal at the beginning of the year. I'm going to double the number of flights that Angel Flight West is doing in Arizona. And then realized pretty quickly that wasn't moving as fast for someone that likes results. That was disappointing. And I was invited to a pediatric care committee meeting for Yuma Regional Medical Center. It is about 3.5 or 4 hours from Phoenix. They have a lot of people that travel from either Yuma to Phoenix or from Yuma to Southern California for care. So I talked about how Angel Flight West can help. Some of the primary missions that we do is we've talked about non-emergency medical care, but also if someone has a loved one receiving treatment far from their home, we can also fly the loved ones back and forth so that they can be with the person who's receiving treatment. We do flights for military veterans and active duty military personnel. We fly in support of other charitable organizations. My favorite statement with Angel Flight West is that it's also other compelling human needs. So I think that just allows us to serve as many people as we can. But anyway, in that meeting, I shared those missions. I didn't know it, but in the room was a lady named Alex, whose son, Alexander, travels regularly from Yuma to Phoenix for care. And I had met with her the week before. It hadn't heard anything back, but she stood up in the meeting and shared how they had their first angel flight. And she said it was life-changing. I didn't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. We weren't on the road for 8 hours. We could get to our appointment and get back and be home for dinner. And it was just a life-changing experience. Yeah, my joy surged to hear that I'd had that impact. And then right after that, another lady stood up. Her name is Stacy. I just had the privilege of spending time with Stacy and her mom just 2 days ago to really get a greater idea of what their story was. But her daughter, Addie, was born with a congenital heart defect that was undetected in 2008. They spent the first 308 or 318 days of Addie's life in the hospital. She had a total of 5 open heart surgeries throughout her life. And Addie got sick in February of 2020 with what probably was COVID, but nobody knew at the time. And with Addie's heart condition, that obviously, as we know now, just a dangerous situation. But she got sick. They scheduled an appointment with their doctor in Phoenix and started the drive from Yuma to Phoenix. And about halfway, and a little teeny spot on the map called Dateland, Arizona, Stacy said that Addie squeezed her hand and she looked over and Addie passed away. And they spent several hours on the side of the freeway waiting for help and then waiting for the medical examiner to come, and ultimately drove home without Addie. And she said, I wish we had known about Angel Flight West. Maybe our story would have been different had we known. And going into that meeting, I told you I'd felt some discouragement, and I realized that I was measuring success completely wrong, that I didn't need to double the number of flights. I just needed to help one. And my hope from everything that I'm doing is that somewhere, somebody who's traveling for care or knows somebody who's traveling or knows a pilot who wants to give back can hear Addie's story and help me make sure that nobody only makes it halfway anymore, that we help people get all the way to the care that they need. And that ultimately for me, selfishly, I don't want to have another conversation where someone says, I wish we would have known. And I'm so grateful that you've allowed me to share that with your audience. And I hope that they'll share this episode with their friends. I'm easy to find on social media, and I respond personally to every message that comes in. So if there are questions that your listeners have, previous podcasts that I've been on, I did make the mistake of putting my cell phone number like on my background. Since realized that maybe that's not the best approach, but I'm very happy to respond on social media. And for people to connect with me, I post something every day that shares the mission that we're doing. And if there are venues that they have, I've discovered, so Julie, you didn't know this, but that was the first real estate convention that I'd been on stage. And that lit something up. And it was almost like flying the airplane for me, where I called my wife and I thought, how do I do more of this? This was so exciting and so fun. The fact to be able to connect with people in that way and to do it for a charitable cause was just lightning in a bottle for me. I can't wait to do more.
I'm writing a note to myself. I always have to take notes so I don't forget different things of just different people to connect you with. It's just amazing. And unfortunately, stories like Stacy's and Addie, like that is not an uncommon narrative. I think that most people would like to dismiss it. It's not reported on the news. It's not something that makes the headlines, but these things do happen. And it's not a guilt trippy or anything, conscious investor. It's great when we can raise our level of awareness so that we can see, is there a way, is there a person? So, right, first it starts with us. We need to look inward. Hey, is there something I need to contribute into this, right? And then we could say, is there a person I need to connect with this? Or is there another organization that I could see as a good alliance with Angel Flight West? And so, right, we start with us, we start with our sphere, who we can connect, we work outwards so that there is a greater impact, and everything in the world is so intricately connected and interwoven that there will be some overlap. There's going to be several of you I know that are going to have your little aha moments, just like I've had a few different names come to mind and things that I'm like, okay, Alan needs this, this, and this, right? So these would be strong connections. So please take that time, conscious investor, to go check out Angel Flight West. All the links will be in the show notes. Make sure you connect with Alan, and then be open to receive, oh, golly, I know this person in this small town who happens to be a pilot, or who knows pilots, or just like think outside your paradigm and great things. That's where the magic happens in life.
Absolutely.
Alan, I'm so grateful for your gift of time. I'm so grateful that you were willing to share your journey and to let us see the real side of that journey, because we do that here on The Conscious Investor. It's really important. That vulnerability allows us to really understand we're not alone in what we are experiencing, and seeing the other side of it and what can come from the struggles that we have in life is so encouraging, because like you said, when we're in the valley of the shadow of death, it's like, is there any way out of this? And so it's always great to have people around us. And thank you so much for all that you do for Angel Flight West. I hope personally to never have to utilize Angel Flight West. However, I love supporting Angel Flight West.
Thank you so much. It's been such a joy to meet you. And I'm just sitting here thinking, I can't wait for my next trip to Idaho to look you up and introduce you to my wife. And I look forward to ongoing friendship and hopefully ways that we can help make the world a better place together, Julia. And this has been wonderful.
Thank you so much. And I agree with all the above. Idaho's beautiful.
It's beautiful in the summer and the fall and the spring. I won't come see you in the winter, Julie. I'm sorry.
Oh, the skiing is so good. I fell in love with winter last year, finally. A season pass to the ski resort will change your life.
All right. You'll have to, maybe that's a part of my life you can help change. So.
I think so. Conscious Investor, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. And please remember, there are so many ways to invest, right? So you can support Angel Flight West. Go to the show notes. If you're looking to have your money make money, remember that we look for investments where our investors are doing something. Their dollars are making money for our investors and also doing something in the world that is really great. So please make sure, if you're not already on our investor list, please make sure that you join that investor list, because we're here to serve and support all investors in taking their first or next step. And I'd love to speak with you more about that. Until next time, live big, love bigger, and do great things.
A lot of people missed out on my recent offering because they simply weren't on my investor list. Being on my newsletter list won't provide you with access to the deals I have. This is because 506B regulations require you and I actually discuss your investment goals before I can show you the deals I have. If you're on the fence about investing in apartments, schedule a call today at 3keysinvestments.com. If you think you're new, so you don't want to be on an investor list, you're missing out on opportunities to refine your ability to review offerings because you simply will never see them. So head over to 3Keys Investments and schedule a call.